All right, what's up, YouTube? Well, we got a break in the action here. The bike work's been blowing up, and the vet's been kind of backburnered in the last couple of weeks, and then we had the hurricane blow through. We survived. Milton, power's back on. We're back in operation and wrenching away here. So today what we're going to do is a O-ring conversion on the front brake calipers of a C3. I've got a new set of calipers that are painted up, but they're lip seal design. And the problem with the lip seal design, and I'll sketch it out in a minute, but is that it's real easy to draw air through the lip seal if you're trying to vacuum. Is a lot of times the caliper pistons will seep brake fluid when they're not under load. So just sitting, it'll tend to bleed a little bit of fluid out, and you'll get drips and drops, and you'll get inside of the wheels, and it won't leak under pressure because the pressure forces the lip seal to seal against the inside of the caliper bores, but it'll seep over time. And I was having this problem with this car here. And the calipers are good; they're tight. They're sleeved. They're new pistons and the rebuild calipers and painted up and nice. But just the lip seal designs is problematic. So I'm going to do an O-ring conversion on it, and we're going to walk through that. So I've got a bit of a window in my work right now. So I'm going to try and knock out this vet so I can get this thing out of the shop. All right, so we got some coffee. We're good to go here. I did a quick sketch out, and basically, see, here's a lip design. And this would represent the caliper. It's a cross section of the caliper. This would be the piston, and then these would be the pad. And of course, there's two pistons on each side. Not that that matters in this case. The way this is sealed, the way this functions, is that brake fluid is pressurized and applied to the backside in this void. It comes in through the body of the caliper and it fills the backside of the pocket that the caliper piston sits in. And the piston is pushed that way to apply the pad to the rotor. The way this is sealed to keep fluid from leaking past the piston is using a seal. In this case, the original design was a lip seal. So basically it's on an angle. So fluid pressure applies, and the harder it applies, the more it pushes the lip seal up into the caliper bore and seals it against leakage from the inside out, which is fantastic. The problem is that if you apply a vacuum to take fluid out, or pull air out as the case would be, what happens is the lip seal are real thin and they tend to fold up and allow air to pass between the piston or the lip seal and the inside of the caliper bore. So it's a common problem. And then they're very thin, it's lightweight, there's very tight clearance between the piston and the caliper bore. So these seals have to be real thin rubber. They're not very stiff, and they tend to let a little bit of fluid seep past that lip seal because the pressure against the inside of the caliper bore is so light because the seals are so thin. So what we've done is we can upgrade this to an O-ring design. And so you'll see that the seal design has changed. Now it's a solid, God, it's got to be 3/16 or 1/4 inch diameter O-ring that wraps around the piston and seals it through pressure against the caliper bore, the piston bore. So now when you apply pressure, the pressure drives in behind the O-ring and helps apply it and keeps it from leaking past. But also under vacuum, when you're drawing fluid this way, you can't draw air in between the O-ring and the inside of the caliper bore. So this is definitely an upgrade in both ways. Obviously, we don't want to ever get air inside the caliper because when you draw in air, and you draw in moisture as well, you just end up with corrosion inside. You're also drawing in dust and debris, and that can clog orifices and contaminate the fluid further, and you get all kinds of ugliness out of it. So we want to keep that full of fluid and no air, no moisture, no dirt, any of that stuff added. We're going to keep all that stuff out of there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this caliper apart, pull the pistons out, pull the seals out, and we're going to upgrade them using a stainless steel brakes kit that I'll show you in just a sec. That comes with new pistons, new seals, new outer dust boots, and it's really a pretty easy job. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's not hard at all. It doesn't even take that long, to be honest with you. Once you get the car up in the air and the wheels off, it's about 15 minutes per caliper. It's really not that hard. So let me get set up over here, and we'll go through the caliper removal and rebuild process. All right, be back. All right, so we're in the passenger side front of this 82 Vet, and first thing we can do is get the line disconnected. Now these lines are threaded directly into the back of the caliper, so you can't disconnect the line at the caliper. You need to disconnect it back off the frame. And I usually like to leave the frame clips in there until I get the line broken loose. Keeps everything from moving around so you can work on it.
You always want to use a line wrench because these line fittings are soft and they're real easy to crush and strip. Once I get this turning around a little bit, I can usually unthread it by hand. And there might be tension because of the clip on the frame. That's kind of torquing the threads up. I'm going to pop this clip off now. I've got the loosened up. You usually wiggle right out of there. There we go. That clips out. We'll see if we can thread this out. Nah, it's going to be a little stiff. I'm just going to grab an open end because it's faster now. The line's already broken loose. I'm not worried about stripping the fitting now. It's obviously in pretty rough shape already. But it doesn't take much torque to spin the fitting out now. It's just a little more than my fingers could generate. A little slippery down there too with the brake fluid. And that's it. Let this line see if it drain out a little bit. I've got this mostly bled out already. So now we're going to go around the back side of the caliper and get it disconnected from the caliper bracket, and we'll be able to put it on the bench and work on it from there. Alright, so now you can see what we're looking at. We've got two bolts, top and bottom, that hold the caliper on. It's these 5/8 bolts here. We'll break these guys loose. Now the caliper comes right off. Hose intact. Alright, so caliper's out. And you see what I mean? It's the line's threaded directly into the back of the caliper, so you can't just loosen the fitting and pull the line off. You'd have to rotate the whole caliper around the line, and it's just as easy to pop this end off and do it that way. Get the shoes pads out of the way. And now we got to split the caliper halves. It's too big, like 13/16, I believe. Let me grab my gun. You don't want to put these back on with a gun because the last thing you want to do is strip out the threads of the caliper, and you want to make sure it's tight enough. So I believe it's 120 foot-pounds, but you can take them off with the gun, no problem. Although I might use Chrome socket because that's a bit tight. This boss around the bolt head is restricting the socket I can get in here. Yeah, it's 13/16. I can use that to snug it up later when we're done. So here are, without putting the hose in my coffee, which is amazing, we've got the halves split, and you can see the halves are sealed together with O-rings. And the kit will come with new O-rings, of course. You don't need to save these. And we've got 4 pistons. These are outer dust boots running outside, and then these seal on the inside. All right, so we've got the half split. Of course, these are 4-piston calipers, two pistons in each side. This is mostly drained, but you want to keep in mind there's going to be fluid in the back of this body. And if you compress these pistons, a lot of times you'll shoot fluid out and mash yourself. Oh, I can feel it squirting out. Yeah. So there's still a good bit of fluid in there. Oop. Did you get it in the coffee? No? All right, coffee's good. I'm just getting the fluid out of there so as I compress these pistons and I'm pulling the seals off, I'm not spraying fluid all over the place. Oh, and there's a bunch coming out of that one. I'll move the piston around a little bit, kind of pump it right out of there. Go on now. All right. And I'll see if we can get these seals out. Sometimes you can get right under them and use the piston for leverage. Pop them. Look at that. Right out. No problem. And here comes the piston with the lip seal. You can see how thin that is. And you can see what I was saying before, as the fluid presses this way, it pushes the seal out against the wall of the caliper. The problem is if you put it under vacuum, you draw air right past it. The springs come off, we'll need to reuse those guys. As you can see, I mean, this isn't brain surgery. It's really not complicated. One thing we do want to verify is that these pistons, or calipers rather, have been sleeved. You want to run O-ring kits in sleeved calipers only. Now, typically, most of the calipers in existence by now have been rebuilt once already, and one of the first steps in rebuilding them is sleeving the calipers because these bores get corroded. Um, they get chewed up, so typically there's a stainless sleeve is pressed down into it. But there is a lip right here and right there where a sleeve has been pressed in. Oh, look at this. There's some funk inside that one. I don't know if that was from assembly at the factory or what. Yeah, there's a bunch of funk in that caliper. It's a brand new caliper. Well, brand new reman anyway. Nice. Springs. Not gonna need these O-rings. And here is the stainless steel brakes kit. Here's the two O-rings for the halves. Here are the pistons and dust boots. And this is the high temp version. That's why they're blue pistons and the orange seals. In case you see the color variation, there's a couple different kits available. Stainless steel offers them a couple. It's only a few dollars difference between the high temp and the standard duty ones. So I always opt for the high temp. I'd rather have that durability, and who knows what this car is going to go through in the future if I decide to get real feisty with it and real hard on the brakes. The last thing I want is the seals and everything breaking down or the pistons expanding too much. O-rings go right on the pistons. I'm going to grab a little clean .3. Not that there wasn't enough .3 splashed around here, but I want to make sure these seals are lubricated so they don't get chewed up going into the bores. You never want to leave brake fluid open. It's hygroscopic. It will attract moisture and absorb it. And that, of course, deteriorates its ability to resist compression and contributes to corrosion in the system. So you lay these on nice and square, and you'll feel the resistance going into the bore. I mean, those O-rings are hitting the outside of the board. Spring in behind, they should press right down. The springs add a little bit of return pressure, but they're not terribly forceful. It's not going to pop the caliper piston back out at you. Sometimes they make it a bit of a pain to get the caliper back on because they want to keep pushing the pads together. Just ease it on down there. If you've got to push that hard, then you've got a problem that's cocked too much. It tends to want to walk a little bit or cock a little bit in the bore. When you push it down, one side will tend to dip before the other. So you've got to be conscious of that and make sure you evenly press it down. If one side drops, immediately move your fingers over to the other side so you can get the piston to go down evenly. You don't want the piston to get cocked in the bore and score the bore or score the piston. And there we go. These guys are in. These guys are going to go here. I should have put those on first. I'm a dumbass. All right, so I got all four of them dropped in there. You don't want to push them all the way down to the bottom of the bore. And if you push them down too far, you can lift them back up a bit. It just makes it a lot easier to get these seals on. The seals, this inside ridge on the seal has to fit in the groove on the top side of the piston. So you want to leave yourself a little room to work here. If you push them down too far, then it's just really difficult to get the seal in there. You don't want to mangle it. If you have them up at the top of the bore like these are, you see they're quite, and you can push them way down. If you have them right up at the top of the bore, just past where the O-ring seats, then it's much easier. These are pretty stretchy and they'll snap right over. No biggie. I'm just gonna press these guys down. Of course, they make special tools for it, but honestly, I don't need it. These are not hard to get in. Not a real press fit. You want to find a socket that fits right over there without messing the seal up. Just give it a little love, and you'll see it'll drop right down here. It doesn't take a great deal of force. That's it. You can hear it when it bottoms. The tone will change as you're tapping on it. That may have sounded bad, but I wasn't hitting it that hard. Um, you may even feel the hex on the inside of the socket touching the rubber dust boot. Man, that's okay. It's just a dust boot. Now, see, now these want to ride. This one wants to ride back up under spring pressure. The seal's helping it too. Down there, you little bugger. I'll be cursing you later when I try to put it back over the caliper, over the rotor rather. So we get our seals. Seals should just drop down into the bore there. And I'm going to go clean the paint off the heads of these because they look all nasty anyway. Be right back. All right, these are all nicey nice. Darn it, we should have got the paint off the end too. I'm going to save my trip back over to the grinder. Yeah, that'll work. Make sure the threads are all nice and clean. Shouldn't be any Loctite or anything in here, but I found weirder stuff. Matter of fact, there's a big chunk of something right there. I don't know if you can make that out. There's a big chunk of something right in the thread. Amazing. This is why we check this stuff. Theoretically, shouldn't be nothing in there, but just chunk of something. Who knows what? All right, so our seals are down nice and flush, almost flush with the top. They're raised enough that they'll seal against this boss when it comes together. Trying to get these centered. What I don't want to do is smear that. If these holes aren't lined up, what I don't want to do is be moving these halves apart and potentially score up that O-ring. I've got them pinned together now. Yeah, this is really tight. This boss is not got a lot of clearance. It's a ride right up on the socket. Even this cheapo chrome socket I grabbed, there's barely enough room to get it in there. And I'm not torquing these yet. I'm just going to run them down so they're tight and they don't come apart and make that O-ring come loose. Once I get on the car, I can torque them down with a torque wrench. You can actually use the bolts and the caliper bracket to hold it in place. All right, so the caliper's back together. A little anti-squeal lube. And we're just hitting these inside edges here. This is where the edges of the shoe is, the edge of the pad is going to ride. So we want to get a decent coating in here, and we're going to put some on the back of the pads too, rather than buttering up the faces of the pistons. Not a lot. You don't want to get them loose when it heats up and coming out of there, but enough that the pad can slide up and down or in and out without shattering, getting hung up. As you can see, these are a real tight fit between those two sides on the sides of the pad here. So it's not hard to see where a little bit of rust buildup or dirt or junk will make these guys start to hang up. Nice. Whoops. There you go. Get up there. Yep. Yep. Getting slippery. Excited to get these gloves off. All right. We're ready to go back on the car. And these are actually being pretty cooperative because they're a holy heck to get over the rotor. It's such a tight fit in there. You can see the pistons want to keep pushing that pad out. So what we could do is make up a spacer to hold the pads apart and let the rotor push the spacer out of there. And what I've found works more often than not, conveniently, is to try a couple different sockets and see if you got one that's just the right length. Almost the right diameter? No, not even. Not even. You'll notice your sockets come in different diameters, but they also tend to get longer as they get bigger. So if you find one just the right size, that sucker wasn't buried enough either. Nope. Let's try that one. Nope. Come on now. Hook a brother up here. Oh, All right. So at least that'll hold the pads apart so you can slip it down over the rotor. And once the rotor comes up between the pads, it'll pop the socket right out. You can also, they make special tools to hold them apart. You can cut a block of wood, whatever floats your boat. It's going to work either way. You just want to hold those pads pinned in their bores. Hold the pistons pinned in their bores while you're putting it over the top. Those little lands that we greased down the inside here are relatively shallow. They're only about 3/8 or half an inch deep. And so if these pads walk out, they'll actually pop off the lands, and then it's even more of a cursing, throwing tools moment when you've got to take the caliper off 5 times to try and get it down over the rotor. All right, I'm going to move the camera. We'll get set up and we'll put this sucker back on. We're almost done. All right, so here we are. We'll pop the caliper back on. One thing you want to keep in mind is, that where the inboard bolts go to hold the caliper on the bracket, these bosses can be pretty big and actually interfere with getting a socket on the caliper assembly bolts when you want to torque those down. So I'm going to put those in, but I'm not going to tighten them down just yet. I'm just going to leave them a little loose so there's room to move the socket around. So you can see now the slides right over the rotor, which is perfect. And it'll push my sacrificial spacer socket out of the way. Get these guys started. Get in there, you little devil. These are grade 8 fine thread. They could be a little bit of a pain in the butt to get in there. Get started. Now I'm just gonna run them down, but I'm not gonna make them tight. I'll be able to use those to torque against. Right, drawing them down. You grab my torque wrench. These caliper halves are 120 foot-pounds. I've got to use a chrome socket here too because there just isn't enough room to get an impact socket, which I'd like to do for anything higher torque, but these are good snap-on chromes. They'll tolerate it. See if this one hasn't torqued over. Yep, see I had to push the caliper back out to get the socket on. All right. Now, we can run these bolts down. All right, and then the bracket mounting bolts go to 70 foot-pounds. Back off my wrench here. And these are, those caliper half bolts are 120, 130 in the front, and quite a bit less in the rear. I think they're about 80 in the rear. But the calipers are different sizes. 70. Oop. Oh, deep to deep. Right side socket kind of helps, little things like that. There we go. And here we are set up back for the line. So what we do is block all the light. We do the same thing we did before backwards. We're going to get this started first and thread it in a good couple of threads. Because these brackets aren't square. The lines get tweaked over time. And if you put the line clamped in the bracket first, it'll very often cock it. And you won't be able to get the thread started. That's all the way in. Get our little clip in there. Oh, get in there, you little bird. Gotta make it straight. I don't know why. It's just like an issue with me. I gotta make those little brackets straight. Get it snugged up. Now, this brake line isn't going to take many more of this, many more times of doing this. This fitting is getting pretty chewed up. Still making a good seal, but I don't know if it's going to handle coming apart again. Every time you do, it tends to wear on the fitting a little bit. Swishes it a little. Even the best wrenches feel a little too much pressure on those hexes. You can see it's not a true hex anymore. It's still gripping it with the wrench, so I'm using it, but I'm not gonna get enough torque on it. Yeah, that's good. Get off. And that's it. Fill it up with brake fluid, bleed it out, put the wheels back on, and we are golden. Thanks for tuning in. Check out my other videos. Right by the shop. I got Harleys in and out of here day in and day out. Just my fun project on the side. But I'm not making a whole bunch of videos about oil changes and battery swaps right now, so there'll be more bikes on there soon, especially once I get a full shop going. And we'll get some more motorcycle content up. I feel like I'm all Corvette videos right now for my fun project on the side, but that's all good. It'll all come out. Have a good one. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe. Bye-bye.